All right, well, here we go. Another video. I'll be somewhat brief in this. I want to hit on a couple of questions that you asked, or at least several questions that you asked. I'm not going to be able to get to all of them, so I've got two sections, close to 40 students, 2 questions apiece. I can't give you 80 answers in less than 15 minutes, but I'll try to address a couple of really important questions. One of them just has to do with the data. So if you remember on page 4, Liptak talks about how the field of career development does not have a lot of data on ethnic minorities and women. So the question here is, I'd be curious to see how the data on these populations are different from Caucasian population. It doesn't include male populations, but I would assume the same question is in line here. And I would, it's interesting. When you think about the book, it's a little bit older of a book. So while the data that's being referred to is going to be a little bit older, I can only imagine that there's going to continue to be some differences there. So, I mean, you think about all the things we've looked at so far with what the data tells us as far as where people end up going for work, right? So if there is some sort of a cultural expectation that based upon your ethnic background, your cultural background, you are to go into this specific field, what does the data tell us as far as are things changing? Or when we, I think we have these limitations, right, where we say, maybe not explicitly, I hope not explicitly, but there's still this implicitness that says that these type of roles are really reserved for, whether it's a Caucasian individual or a male individual, right? So, and there's this expectation that you should or should not pursue these roles, and we talk about breaking the glass ceiling and holding roles in senior leadership and all of that. But I would imagine that there's, again, I'm not the researcher extraordinaire, but I would imagine that there's still not a lot of data on there. Though I think we're moving in some positive directions to help encourage folks that wouldn't necessarily consider certain roles or industries to consider those roles or industries. I think it's a great question, and I think one of the things that I think about when it comes to things like this where I don't have the data or the answers to share specifically is these are great research projects, right? So even in the well-being text, a lot of folks, they will read that book and they'll go, well, why is there not a discussion of spiritual well-being? And I think I may have mentioned this beforehand. My response has always been, well, because, to my knowledge, Rath and Harder are not folks that identify with any sort of a faith background of some sort, in that same vein. So they're not going to be writing to that population. However, if you were looking for, a research project, or if you're looking to write your own book, or maybe even, an addendum to the book, similar to what Jim Collins has done with his book, Good to Great, maybe there's a book for you to work on yourself. So in the same way as maybe there's a book or a research article to write about spiritual well-being, maybe there's some more research for you to do on women and ethnic minorities within the field of career development. So that's great question. Thank you for that. Let me go another one. It says in page 6 of treatment planning, a list of tasks are provided to help the reader understand the components of the counseling process. And I love this question. It says, one of the tasks indicates that an individual's career choice ultimately involves a matching of their characteristics with that of the work environment. I was wondering, and I love how this is phrased, it's just I was wondering, such a conversationalist approach, so thank you for this. I was wondering, how do we discern whether or not these characteristics are genuine and true to the individual, or if they're learned, right? That's a great question. Man, I don't know that we can be for sure. I think that we can, and not that you're asking how do we be for sure, you're asking how do you discern. I think through the discernment process, here's the thing why I would probably add a distinction to the work that I do, and I know it's not all about me, but I can speak from personal experience. I don't consider myself to be conducting career counseling as much as I do career coaching. And the difference there, and there's some brief mention of some differences between counseling and coaching. Actually, it's kind of a contentious point of discussion within the career development realm. In fact, I was talking to a previous colleague here at my current institution, and she's like, man, these folks that I tell them I'm a career coach, and they get so worked up. Or no, she said I'm a career counselor, and they said, no, you're not. You are not a career counselor. You're a career coach. And she's like, so kind of backed off. But we're doing a little essentially the same thing. And at the same time, a coach is going to be more, we're going to evoke things out. We're going to pull things out of people. I see potential, just like a baseball or a basketball or softball coach might, and they're going to pull things out and then prod them to continue to get better. Whereas a counselor might actually add a bit more direction and more imperative statements like you should do this, whereas a coach might actually ask questions. So as we're discerning, is this something that's actually true to the individual or is it learned? I think environmental factors and influences are absolutely things that we need to take into account when we're thinking about our clients. But I think it's going to come more from a lot of questions, more questioning than it would be giving answers. Because I think that when we can actually ask the right questions, and this is where it's really important that we listen, so I think being slow to speak and quick to listen, so listening really well, and asking really good, thoughtful questions is going to be really, really important. So that's another great question, but I think in our role, asking questions is so key because we're never going to know exactly how we can help a client if we don't actually spend time to ask them thoughtful questions to get to the heart and the root of what's actually taking place. And here's another question I wanted to get at. It says, I'm aware of the impact of newer technology in the workplace, but I'm wondering if there's been any research done in regard to the effect of social media on careers. And that's a great question. And again, similar to what I said earlier, here's another great research project for you to work on. I'm not aware of anything specific, but I mean, we could only imagine. I mean, all of the social media. Just think of the FOMO and what is it? Fear of missing out, and then just like this thought, like I wish that I had that, right? This covetousness and this jealousy, and so people are choosing jobs perhaps because they want the things that people are posting in these social media pictures, and I want that lifestyle, and I want that car, and I want all of these things, so I'm going to go get this job when in fact they may hate that job, or that it just may just like be sucking the life out of them. While I can only speak anecdotally about that, and I'm sure that we could probably all say the same thing because we've probably in some ways fallen prey to it ourselves, I think that social media these days has had a huge impact on career development, on the choices that people make. Because we see these, these faux lives that are presented in pictures and videos, and and everybody's got everything is so great and well put together, and I love my job, and then the reality is that that's just not it's not an accurate depiction of how life is actually occurring for most folks. Even on LinkedIn, you have all these updates, and people are updating jobs, and they're getting these great degrees, and they're they're updating their position titles and where they work, and I think it's great. Let's absolutely champion and celebrate people's successes, but don't covet their successes. I think that each of us have our own successes, and we need to be content with the opportunities that we've been presented and given, and the ones that we haven't been given, and just realize that that's just not right or best for us, at least at this time in our careers. So great questions. Thanks for that. Let's see. So I did read how compensation plans have been causing employers to pay less toward employee pension plans and health insurance costs, which in result is why employees are paying more for their benefits. I just don't understand why or how that happened, or how it can be resolved. That's a great question. I mean, when you're paying more in salaries, and here's the thing that I would think about, and this is what I've said to especially my undergrad students. In fact, I used to teach a career and life planning class for undergraduate leadership studies students. They'd come into the class, and I would actually have them, they'd read some great books, and we'd have some great discussions. But then I had folks come in and actually give them really good, just life lessons, right? I had somebody come in and talk about how to search for jobs, and how to apply for jobs, and how to interview for jobs, and how to dress for jobs, all of these different things. And I had one person come in and talk about benefits. And I think this was the most important, call it lecture, if you will, that took place in that class. Because here's the thing that I would lay out sometimes. So if you're looking at two jobs, okay, they look very similar in kind. One of them pays $65,000 a year, okay, and one of them pays $59,000 a year, okay. We're going to think that the $65,000 a year job is actually the better paying job. However, let's say the $65,000 a year job, the benefits that come with that cost $1,200 a month. Okay, I'm not a math person, but I'm going to tell you that $1,200 is not out of the question, especially even, I would say, for employer-provided benefits. $65,000 a year annually, $1,200 per month for benefits. Okay, that's $14,400. Okay, just did that math in my mind. I'm surprised I got it right, but I think I did. 12 months, $1,200, $14,400. Subtract that from $65,000. Okay, now we're looking at $55,600. Okay, so now we have the $59,000 a year job, and let's say the benefits are $300 per month. Okay, so now I'm looking at 3 times 12. There's $3,600 minus 59,000. Okay, so I'm looking at what about $55,400. Okay, so 55 versus 54. So the difference is not significant, but I'm actually going to have more take-home pay with the $59,000 a year job than I would with the $65,000 a year job. And we look at that and we go, wait a second, that doesn't make any sense, right? So 65 to, actually it makes a lot of sense. Actually, I'm sorry, the math was way off. There's a lot more, right? So the $59,000 a year job at 55 is actually about $4,000 more, $3,000 or $4,000 more per year. And again, I told you I'm not a math person, but you get the idea. All right, so I think we think this higher paying salary is going to be a better paying job, and that's not always the case. That's one factor to think about. Employer is going to say, well, I'm going to pay you more money, but the correlation between the increase in salary, if I get let's say I get a 2% salary increase, that's great. But what if my benefits go up 5% or 10%? Or I've heard of people who their benefits have gone up 20, 30% per year. They may have gotten a raise, but their benefits have increased. And the challenge is that a lot of the time, the employer who has control over the actual set salary does not have control over the actual set cost of the benefit, right? So in working at APUs, I did for the last, well, I haven't been there for a year now, but the previous 12 and a half years, we worked with an insurance broker. And this broker would work with the insurance companies on our behalf to get us the best deal. And we had well over 1,000 employees. We had some stipulations as far as health requirements. We couldn't smoke. We had, there was drinking in moderation, no drug use, and so forth. All of these different things, right? So basically things that were helping us to care for our bodies. And so when you think about it, Kaiser, who was our main provider, we were paying them a certain amount of money. They were willing to continue to give us a really good deal on our benefits because they actually made money on the APU employee because our health risks were so much lower than organizations that were not requiring or encouraging their employees to live by certain health standards like APU was, right? So even though they were making money on us, their prices were still increasing, and our broker could only get us such, a certain good deal on that. So there wasn't really control over that. So how do we fix it? I don't know. It's a great question. But I think that when we're working with clients, it's going to be really important, especially if we're working with folks that are looking, hey, I've got these 2 job offers. We have to factor in not just the actual base salary, but what's the cost of the benefits themselves. So that's an excellent, excellent question. Thank you. So many good questions in here. I wish I could get to all of them. I'll have to respond to a lot of them in writing. But basically, this is kind of what I want to do. I want to pick out a couple of questions. There's nothing going to be earth-shattering. There's nothing going to be, just kind of like, oh my goodness, I didn't even think about that. But things that I just want to go over. I want to give you some response on, and then we can continue a conversation about that. So keep asking these great questions. Oftentimes the questions that you're asking are more for you to consider them, to put them in writing, and sometimes your classmates will respond, sometimes they won't. But I'm really grateful. I mean, just wonderful questions, wonderful thoughts. Thanks for all of that. So let's see. Says, are all LPCCs therapists, or is that what is being required now? Again, I think I mentioned this earlier. Anything LMFT or LPCC related, that's something that you're going to want to talk to your program director about, because that's not what I do. And that's really going to be a state requirement, at least for California. So I know that I have some friends that have gone on to graduate school and done counseling and psychology degrees, and they don't have a licensed marriage and family therapy license in their states. They're simply licensed professional clinical counselors. They can do a lot of things that an LMFT can. In fact, they actually have easier restrictions on crossing state boundaries and jurisdiction. But as far as the specifics of that, you'll want to speak to your program director. All right? Great questions. I'll respond in writing to a number of these questions, not all of them, but some of them. So watch for that. Hope you're having a great week 5, and we'll see you on online.